that the government is adhering to. And if the member is opposed to the rise in GST, he's free to go out to Mana and announce Labor's new policy. Cut GST and take away the income tax cuts. And as far as I'm aware, the member has not been brave enough to do that.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, how is he adhering to his promise not to increase GST when he's just increased it by 2.5%?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as the member knows, there was much discussion over those quotes. And as is usual with the Labor Party, they're making it up. The Prime Minister answered a question.
Point of order, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, my question was again quite straightforward, and there's a series of attacks being made on the opposition, but no endeavour to answer the question.
Order. No. Well, actually, I'll hear the Minister then on a point of order indeed. The Honourable
Mr
Bill
Speaker,
English.
I'm just dealing with the regular issue now where the opposition manufacture quotes. Now, we have the choice of either just ignoring manufactured quotes like this one today and one yesterday that was applied to me, or trying to deal with it. And it's in the public interest that there's clarity over whether the assertion made by the opposition is correct or not correct. And in this case, I attempted to clarify it.
I hear the Minister, and that is a valid point that a Minister can, when a question contains a quote, a Minister can certainly correct where the quote gives a misleading impression. The Minister can certainly correct that. No problem with that at all. But there's a difference between correcting that and just dumping on the questioner. And today, it's my view that the Minister has attempted to dump on the questioner a little too much on the wrong questions. There are some questions that invite a political response. There are others that don't. Now, that last question, I believe, did have an element of politics in it. And because the reason why it had an element of politics in it, because the quote, anyone who's been around this House for a while would know the quote is in fact taken from a wider context, and the wider context is left out of the quote. But the Minister, in answering it, should deal with that and not just dump on the questioner. That is the way to handle that kind of question if this House is to avoid excessive disorder.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mellon.
Mr Speaker, I think there's one further point, and I of course accept that there's always context around quotes, but I think there is a difference between taking a quote out of context and manufacturing a quote, which the accusation was made. That, sir, I think is the equivalent of misleading the House, and that accusation shouldn't be made across the House.
Order. I think under the circumstances we should let things lie where I've ruled, but I do understand the point the member is making. There is a difference between manufacturing a quote and taking a quote out of context, and I think the Minister shouldn't have alleged anyone's manufacturing quotes. But I think I understand the concern about taking a quote out of context, but the way to deal with that is to demonstrate the way it is out of context rather than just dump on the questioner. Unless the quote is used in a highly political way, then I'm not going to protect the questioner. The Ministers are free to deal with the questioners in a reasonable way if they're foolish enough to make a question highly political. Question number